June 1938 also saw Circus the Comic Riot #1, published by Globe Syndicate, cover dated June 1938. Basil Wolverton art is featured, as is Jack Cole art. There is a mile-high pedigree copy of this issue. Gerber and Overstreet both consider this comic scarce. The cover art is by Will Hamill. Pee-wee Throttle is a 2-page story from writer-artist Jack Cole. Jack Hinton the Guardsman is featured in 6 pages from writer-artist Will Eisner. Bob Kane gives us the short story Van Bragger, writing and drawing, as well as Side Streets of New York, also a 1-page story. Bob Kane used the alias Robert K. Dinty and Mope is a 1-page story drawn by James Pabian. And James Jim Pabian, born April 14, 1909, lived until July 23, 1996, an American screenwriter and director of short films. He co-wrote and directed the Tom and Jerry short, The Brothers Carry Mouse Off. He also co-wrote another Tom and Jerry short, Haunted Mouse. Both were released by MGM in 1965. But earlier in his career, Pabian also worked as an artist for Dell Comics in the 40s and 50s and created the syndicated daily comic strips Hollywood Johnny, Screen Girl, and Go-Go Grover. He first worked in comics in Circus the Comic Riot #1. Basil Wolverton made his official first appearance in comics with the 2-page science fiction story Space Hawks. And using the alias Dennis Langdon, Basil Wolverton also gave us a 2-page story, Disguise the Detective, an interesting detective mystery story. Basil Wolverton, born July 9, 1909, lived until December 31, 1978, an American cartoonist and illustrator and producer of preposterous pictures of peculiar people who prowl this perplexing planet. His many publishers included Marvel Comics and Mad Magazine. Disguise the Detective and Space Hawks were published in 1938 in Circus Comics. In 1940, Space Hawk, a different and improved feature, made its debut in Target Comics, published by Novelty Press. It ran for 30 episodes until 1942, a total of 262 pages. Wolverton's humor feature Powerhouse Pepper, about a super-strong, if none too bright boxer, appeared in various comic books published by Timely Comics from 1942 through 52, and he worked on many other Timely titles and created other unique characters. Natty Nats is a 1-page story from writer-artist Ed Nofziger, who was born 1913 and lived until October 16, 2000. He began working for the Saturday Evening Post in 1938 and also in the comic book market that year. After World War II, he went into animation, working for UPA Studios, drawing Mr. Magoo and creating the character Mother Magoo. He later worked at Hanna-Barbera, where he did the Rough and Ready comic strips and stories. Sprinkle Puss is a 2-page story written and drawn by Dave Gerard. Born June 18, 1909, lived until August 31, 2003, a prolific magazine humor cartoonist from the 1940s through the 60s, most notably for Collier's Weekly, Country Gentleman, and the Saturday Evening Post. Between 1953 and 66, Gerard drew the newspaper comic strip William. William was also featured in a Dell comic book. He began in comic books in 1938 with Circus the Comic Riot #1. Bo Gus is a 2-page story from writer-artist Wesley Morse, born June 17, 1897, until June 20, 1963, a cartoonist who is most famous for the creation of the Bazooka Joe comic strip for the bubblegum company Topps in 1953. Morse was one of only 2 known authors of the underground Tijuana Bible comics in the 1930s. Morse drew 60 of these little booklets, as well as 4 of the larger, more expensive 16-page books from the same publishers. Morse worked on various comic strips starting in 1925. Bo Gus, which appeared in the early comic book Circus the Comic Riot, began in 1938. Galahad Jones and His Lady is a 2-page story from writer-artist Eldon Fry, and he was born in 1909, living until 1990, a nationally known artist whose oil portraits of aviation pioneers hang in San Diego's Aerospace Hall of Fame. His helpful hint, Putterin' Pete cartoon series was syndicated around the world. For the first time ever in the modern comic book market, there were 3 new #1 series debuting on the stands. The third one this month was Crackajack Funnies, #1, published by Dell Comics, June 1938. One of Dell's earliest titles followed a common format of the day of reprinting popular comic strips. Over 20 different strips were featured in this issue. There is a mile-high pedigree copy of this issue, possibly the earliest comic ever to have a 9.8 grade from CGC. The cover features the characters Don Winslow, Dan Dunn, Freckles, Myra North, and Tom Mix. Highlights include Dan Dunn in a 5-page story from writer-artist Norman Marsh. Don Winslow appears in 4 pages from writer Lieutenant Frank Martinek and art by Leon Baroth in their military adventure story. And Tom Mix appears in a 4-page story, art by Al Lewin in this Western Frontier story, copyright by Stefan Schlesinger, probably from an unidentified Big Little book. Tom Trailer G-Man X32 is a 4-page story, drawn possibly by Milt Youngren. And this issue features a promo ad for Mickey Mouse. Super Comics number 2, published by Dell Comics, June 1938, featured a cover of Smokey Stover. The art is possibly by Bill Holman. Dick Tracy appears in a 4-page story from writer-artist Chester Gould in his classic detective mystery, reprinting from the Dick Tracy Sundays from May 9th to May 30th, 1937. Little Orphan Annie appears in 4 pages from writer-artist Harold Gray, featuring the characters Daddy Warbucks, Annie, and Mr. Am, reprinting from the Little Orphan Annie Sundays from May 9th to May 30th, 1937. Terry and the Pirates return in a 4-page story from Milton Caniff. And this is reprinted from the Chicago Tribune Sundays, dated October 4th through October 25th, 1936. The Lost Colony of Atlantis is a 4-page story from writer-artist William Ward and is reprinted from the Mickey Mouse Weekly from Great Britain. William Ward, born 1887, lived until 1958. He is from the United Kingdom. William Ward was a British animator and comic book artist, best known for drawing the British Donald Duck serials and his work for Gerald Swan comic books. He was hired by Autumn's Press to draw a series of continuing Donald Duck comics for Mickey Mouse Weekly. Beside the dailies by Al Taliaferro and the early Italian comics, these stories are among the first comic appearances ever of Donald Duck. Ward's first story is even considered the first Duck adventure comic ever. He drew 12 serials between 1937 and 1940 and gave Donald co-stars like the girl Donna and the Scottish sailor Mac. His stories had strange and wildly imaginative settings like the Wild West, the Arabian Nights, 5,000 Fathoms Under the Sea, the Moon, and the planet Venus. Comics on Parade number 3, published by United Feature Syndicate, June 1938. Tarzan leads the march on the cover with such notables as Little Abner, the Katzenjammer Kids, Nancy, Abby and Slats, and others following behind him. There is a Lamont Larson pedigree copy of this issue. The Comics number 8, published by Dell Comics, June 1938. There is a mile-high pedigree copy of this book from the Edgar Church collection. The cover feature is Pop, Have You Seen My Arrow? Ted Strong appears in a 4-page story with art by Al Carino, reprinted from the Ted Strong Sundays at the George Matthew Adams Service from 1935. Rod Ryan of the Sky Police appears in a 4-page story from writer-artist Paul H. Jepson. This is an early science fiction comic strip featuring the characters Rod Ryan and the Unicorn Warriors, and is reprinted from Rod Ryan of the Sky Police newspaper strip from the George Matthew Adams Service in 1935. Gordon Fife and the Boy King is 3 pages from writer Bob Moore and artist Carl Pfeiffer. This adventure story is reprinted from the Gordon Fife and the Boy King newspaper strip at Watkins Syndicate. Tex Ritter is 4 pages from artist Norman Fallon, the Western Frontier story. The Enchanted Stone of Time is 2 pages from writer-artist Adolphe Barrault. It's a fantasy supernatural story. And Adolphe Barrault was born January 9th, 1899 and lived until October 23rd, 1985. He became a highly productive artist for pulp magazines published by Harry Donenfeld from the 30s to the 50s, including romance, detective, and mystery titles. He also made a comic strip called Flossie Flip for one of those titles, The Police Gazette. Barrault and Donenfeld joined forces and founded Barrault Studios. One of his best-known creations of the time was the adult comic strip Sally the Sleuth that appeared in Spicy Detective Stories from 1934. Barrault drew the comic until 1942 when several other artists took over. Sally was soon followed by other comic characters such as Dan Turner. By 1935, Burrow also found the time to create the syndicated comic strip The Enchanted Stone of Time, and a year later he was also present in comic books like More Fun Comics and New Fun Comics. Burrow renamed his business Majestic Studios that he headed from 1936 to 53. The studio produced a great many comic features for the comic industry, including Ace, The Black Spider and the Raven, and for DC National, The Magic Crystal of History and Tad Among the Pirates. Feature Funnies, number 9, published by Quality Comics, June 1938. Parts of this issue are reprinted from Wags, the UK edition from Editor's Press Service, issue number 44, dated December 31st, 1937. The masked hero, the Clock, appears on the cover the same month as Action Comics number 1 with Superman. Joe Palooka appears in a one-page story, written and drawn possibly by Ed Cronin. The superhero, The Clock, appears in a 5-page story from writer-artist George Brenner, and this is reprinted from the Wags UK series. Will Eisner writes and draws Hawks of the Seas in 4 pages in his historical story, reprinted from the Wags UK series, issue 42, dated December 17th, 1937. Lollapalooza returns in 4 pages from writer-artist Rube Goldberg in his humor story reprinted from the Frank J. Markey Syndicate. Feature Books number 14 features Popeye, published by David McKay Publications, June 1938. It's Popeye in Wild Oats, an EC Cigar story, cover and art, considered scarce by Overstreet. LZ Cigar gave us this cover of Popeye featuring gold coins. And there is 71 pages of Popeye strips inside, featuring Popeye, Olive Oil, The Jeep, and Papa, reprinted from the Popeye newspaper strips in 1937. Ace Comics number 15, published by David McKay Publications, June 1938. The cover features the Cats and Jammer Kids with art by Joe Musial. Jungle Jim returns in 4 pages from writer-artist Alex Raymond. His Jungle story is reprinted from newspaper reprints from 1936 and 37. Blondie appears in 4 pages from Murat Young under the alias Chick Young. The humorous story is reprinted from newspaper reprints from 1936 or 37. The Phantom appears in 4 pages from writer Lee Falk with art by Ray Moore in this early adventure jungle superhero title reprinted from newspapers from 1936 or 37. Nicodemus O'Malley and His Whale Palsy Walsy is a 1-page story from writer-artist Ad Carter and is an early fantasy supernatural comic strip, reprinting from either the 36 or 37. The Nicodemus strip occupies the top third of 3 different Just Kids pages. August Daniel Carter, born 1895, lived until 1957, an American comic strip cartoonist who created the long-running Just Kids strip. He was known as Ad Carter, the signature he used. Just Kids looked like regular fellers, as Carter imitated Byrne's art style as well as his character setup. While the imitation was never as popular as the original, it still was quite popular. In addition to pins, dolls, games, and other merchandise products, it was the subject of a coloring book in 1928 and a 16-page comic book reprinted in 1932. Starting in 1934, it was the subject of at least a half-dozen big little books in the late 30s. Dell Comics would also put it in the back pages of several of its comic strip reprint titles. Detective Comics number 16, published by DC Comics, June 1938. This was on the stands at the same time as Action Comics number 1, and there is an ad for Superman in this issue. There is a Billy Wright pedigree copy of this issue. The cover art is by Craig Flessel, featuring gunfights, machine guns, motorcycles, and police. Speed Saunders appears in 6 pages from artist Craig Flessel in his detective mystery story. Larry Steele appears in 6 pages from writer-artist Will Eli. Superman's creators Siegel and Schuster give us Spy, an 8-page adventure story, and this features the first appearance of Barrow. Siegel and Schuster give us another detective mystery, Slam Bradley, in a lengthy 13-page story, and this one features the first appearance of Joan Carter. The Funnies, number 21, published by Dell Comics, June 1938. The cover features Scribbly and Our Boarding House. Highlights include 4 aces in 2 pages from Hal Forrest, reprinted from the 4 Aces Sundays at the Bell Syndicate. Scribbly appears in 2 pages from writer-artist Sheldon Mayer. The Wonderland of Oz appears in 2 pages in this supernatural story based on The Wizard of Oz, featuring Tip, Mombi, and Jack Pumpkinhead. And Jack Randall is a 6-page Western frontier story from writer-artist Richard Rogers, adapted from the Monogram motion picture. Tip Top Comics number 26, published by United Features, June 1938, features Tarzan, Captain and the Kids, Jim Hardy, Lil Abner, Fritzy Ritz, Bronco Bill, Frankie Doodle, Little Mary Mix-Up, Joe Jinx, and others. King Comics number 27, published by David McKay Publications, June 1938. Popeye and Henry are featured on the cover. There is a Mile High pedigree copy of this issue from the Edgar Church Collection, as well as a Lost Valley pedigree copy. New Adventure Comics number 27, published by DC Comics, June 1938. This book has the same cover date as Action Comics number 1, and the issue's ad for the later book, featuring a black and white image of the Superman cover, is one of the earliest published images of Superman. The underwater cover is by Craig Flessel, of a diver battling a shark. This is the second issue published by Detective Comics, Inc. The promo ad for Superman reads, "Flash, here's a new magazine you can't afford to miss." Superman creators Siegel and Schuster team up for Federal Men in 4 pages in their detective mystery featuring Steve Carson and the first appearance of the villain, the Cobra. Rusty and his pals appear in a 4-page story written and drawn by Bob Kane. The adventure story features Rusty, Tubby, Specs, and the villain Chen Fu. Professor Doolittle is a 2-page story, also written and drawn by Bob Kane. Firing Squad Fizzle is a 2-page text story written by Gardner Fox under the alias Paul Dean. Dale Daring is a 2-page story from writer-artist Will Eli and features the first appearance of the villain Dwan Yo. Stardust is a 1-page strip written and drawn by Bernard Bailey and features movie stars such as Victor McLaglen, Gene Muir, and Spanky McFarland from Our Gang. Junior Federal Men Club is a 1-page text article written by Jerry Siegel under the alias Steve Carson. Robin Hood returns in a 6-page story from writer-artist Sven Elven in this historical adventure, which features Robin Hood, Little John, and Will Gamewell. Nadir, Master of Magic, returns in a 4-page story from writer-artist Will Eli in this early fantasy supernatural. Popular Comics number 29, published by Dell Comics, June 1938, features Mutt and Jeff on the cover, and in fact, they appear 5 different times in this issue. Herky appears 4 times. Don Dixon and the Hidden Empire return in a 2-page story from writer Bob Moore with art by Carl Pfeiffer, and Moore and Pfeiffer also give us Tad of the Tanbark again in 2 pages. Tailspin Tommy returns in 4 pages from writer-artist Hal Forrest. Part 2 of Son of the Minutemen is a 2-page story written by Sam Merwin Jr. under the alias Carter Sprague. This series precedes by a year Merwin's first published science fiction story in the pulp, Thrilling Wonder Stories. More Fun Comics number 32, published by DC Comics, June 1938. Published the same month as Action Comics number 1 and has an ad for that issue and Superman on the inside front cover. There is a Billy Wright pedigree copy of this issue. The cover art is by Vincent Sullivan, featuring kids painting a horse into a zebra. The Superman ad reads, "Flash, here's a new magazine you can't afford to miss." Sandra of the Secret Service appears in 3 pages from artist Will Eli. Superman creators Siegel and Schuster give us Dr. Occult in a 4-page story. Their early fantasy supernatural title features Dr. Occult and Rose Psychic. The story says continued, but is never finished. Dr. Occult would not appear again in comics for 40 years until All-Star Squadron number 49 from DC in the 1980s. Johnny Law appears in a 4-page story with art by Will Eli. Cap'n Jerry is a 4-page story with art by R.A. Burley, and this is the first appearance of Cap'n Jerry. Superman creators Siegel and Schuster give us Radio Squad, a 2-page detective mystery featuring the characters Sandy Keene and the villain Blackie Turner. Nevertheless, It's True is a 1-page cartoon from writer-artist Sheldon Moldoff. Bob Kane writes and draws Ginger Snap in a 2-page story. Sheldon Moldoff also gives us Odds and Ends, a short 1-page cartoon which he wrote and drew. And Jack Woods returns in a 4-page story drawn by Will Eli. Mickey Mouse Magazine number 33, or Volume 3 number 9, is published by KK Publications, or Western. June 1938. This is the second cover featuring Dopey from the Seven Dwarfs, and it is the third Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs related cover in this series. Famous Funnies, number 47, published by Eastern Color, June 1938. Still the longest running comic book to this date. There is a Lost Valley pedigree copy of this issue. The cover features the characters Rudy Nebb and Pa Riffle. Buck Rogers returns on a 4-page story from writer Phil Nolan with art by Dick Calkins in this early classic science fiction strip. Hairbreadth Harry is a 1-page strip written and drawn by F.O. Alexander, featuring the characters Harry and Rudolph Razendale. War on Crime, the first comic book crime genre strip, continues, this time with 3 pages from writer Rex Collier and art by Jimmy Thompson. Bobby returns in a 1-page story from writer-artist S.M. Iger, and the humor title is copyright Eisner and Iger. And Iger also gives us a 1-page Queenie strip under the alias Bob Bliss.